So, Ahsoka was a disaster, no surprise there, and before it even came out, I promised myself I wouldn't so much as touch the show with a 10-foot pole, and I did a fairly good job of keeping that promise. I only watched the show through reviews, and shared my thoughts on it via our Discord community, rather than writing up a long-winded script. But it so happened that while I was enjoying watching EFAP rip into the series, my chronic case of writer's brain struck and began to formulate an idea for a rewrite. So here I am ready to torture myself in an attempt to make something truly awful into something good. Hopefully. So first things first, I'm going to be making significant changes to both Rebels and Season 2 Episode 5 of The Mandalorian for the sake of this rewrite. For Rebels, firstly, I'll be changing it so that Sabine's force sensitivity was already established, probably in the latter half of the show, and she was apprenticed to Kanan alongside Ezra, making her relationship with those two a lot stronger than it was originally. Like in Ahsoka, Sabine's ability to use the force is incredibly limited. She can use it passively, giving her enhanced reflexes and such, but performing basic techniques such as force push or pull is still beyond her. Secondly, I'll be removing Sabine's Mandalorian background, since I'll be focusing more on her attachment to Kanan and Ezra rather than her attachment to her lost clan and homeworld. And having her be a hot-headed Jedi-esque warrior clashes too much with the idea of her having a strict Mandalorian upbringing. Obviously, she'll be losing her Beskar armor due to this change, though I'll probably let her keep her dual pistols. Lastly, Morgan will have been a loyal enforcer for Thrawn, though due to being separated from him during the Season 4 finale, she wouldn't have been forced into exile as he was. So for The Mandalorian, I'll have Ahsoka simply rounding up Morgan as part of an Imperial remnant. But even after Ahsoka has subdued Morgan, Morgan seems entirely unwilling to admit defeat, and hints that the exile of her former superior isn't so permanent as the heroes believed, though Ahsoka isn't able to get any more information out of her. As a final note, despite the many liberties I'll be taking, I do intend overall to try to stick as much as I can to the original outline for the series. Okay, on to the actual rewrite. Buckle in, folks, things might get wild. Episode 1 opens on an unknown planet, rain falling heavily. Two hooded figures stand gazing upon a rather dilapidated-looking residence, then slowly advance toward it. We cut to inside the residence, where a disheveled-looking man is nervously pacing the floor and biting at his nails. Then his door slides open, revealing the two hooded figures, and his face lights up. He proclaims how happy he is that they came and says they were the first to believe him. The figures remove their hoods, revealing themselves as Baylan and Shin. The apprentice asks sharply if the man was telling the truth, if he really traveled beyond the unknown regions. The man nods enthusiastically and explains in a scattered manner about how he discovered a gate that brought him to another galaxy. He offers to show them, but only if they don't try to steal the credit for his discovery. Baylan gives his word, and they start off. As they travel through the unrelenting downpour of rain, Shin complains that the man could very well be leading them nowhere, but Baylan urges her to be patient. They're eventually led to a cave, and after heading considerably far underground, they discover a massive cavern housing some strange pyramidal structure. The man tells them the gate is inside, and they continue to follow him, passing the bones of what must have been colossal creatures as they walk. After entering a large chamber within the pyramid, the man stops, warning them that the gate will try to mess with their minds. Baylan takes a few steps forward, spying a strange light ahead. He starts asking their guide questions about how many times he traveled through the gate, if anyone else ever saw it, and if he'd begun charting this other galaxy. The man answers cryptically, saying he ventured through the gate many times, but that no one else ever wanted to travel through with him, and that he didn't have the map. Baylan tells him his usefulness has come to an end, and Shin immediately kills the man. Then she turns to stare into the light, asking Baylan what it might be. Baylan answers, it's an infinity gate. By the way, if you don't know what an Infinity Gate is, I'd recommend you read the Dawn of the Jedi comics or Infinity's End. Admittedly, I haven't read the latter, but I have read the former, and it is a great story. Absolutely well worth your time. Shin expresses some concern over the dead man's warning that the gate will try to mess with their minds, but Baylan assures her that he knows how to circumvent the gate's natural defenses, citing the records of an old acquaintance, Quinlan Voss, as the source of this information. He tells her, however, that it'll be a lengthy process, and in the meantime, she needs to clear up loose ends. Shin nods once and heads off. Our second scene opens with Sabine piloting a small ship toward a New Republic prisoner transport. She takes a deep breath and says, "Here we go." Signaling the transport, she asks permission to come aboard and is quickly granted her request. The captain of the transport greets her in the hangar, asking her why she's there. Sabine tells him that she needs to question one of his prisoners, to which he replies that he received no notice for any such thing. Sabine digs her heels in, claiming that her orders came from General Syndulla. The captain reluctantly grants her permission to question a prisoner, though as soon as she's out of earshot, he orders one of his underlings to look into Sabine's claims. Sabine finds Morgan's name on the transport register and heads straight to her cell. Morgan mockingly says how nice it is to have company, but Sabine wastes no time in getting to the point. She recalls just how loyal Morgan was to Thrawn and insists that Morgan must have tried to find him, but Morgan stubbornly refuses to give Sabine any information, continuing to mock her until suddenly Sabine pulls a hidden blaster and puts it directly to Morgan's head, threatening a hasty end unless Morgan tells her what she wants to know. Morgan appears unfazed, but nonetheless informs Sabine about a rumor of a man on some backwater planet who claims to have traveled beyond the unknown regions, and concludes that nothing Sabine might do could possibly prevent Thrawn's return. Sabine utters a startled, "What did you say?" And that's when the door of the cell flies open, revealing the captain and his security standing by. The captain sees the blaster in Sabine's hand and orders her to stand down. The game is up. The captain tells her that General Syndulla wishes to speak with her immediately, and the scene cuts to Sabine privately being scolded by a hologram of Hera. Sabine sarcastically thanks Hera for ratting her out, but Hera refuses to tolerate her attitude. She says Sabine could have easily been demoted for what she pulled, though after taking a moment to calm down, Hera explains that she did actually cover for Sabine, telling the captain that she was simply rescinding her orders and wanted to speak with Sabine at once. Sabine takes a moment to calm down herself and offers a genuine thank you to Hera. Hera orders her back to Lothal directly and says she'll meet Sabine there to finish the discussion. We cut to a close-up of Ahsoka. She's clearly lost in thought, and we hear Luke's voice asking her if she's alright. She insists she's fine, and we pull back to see the forest surroundings of Ossus. Luke joins Ahsoka on the fallen tree trunk she's currently using as a seat, and utters a deep sigh. Ahsoka says it's her turn, and asks if Luke is doing alright. He starts to tell her what's on his mind, but stops short, prompting Ahsoka to intuit his troubles. She correctly points out that he's building an academy, but has no students. Luke shakes his head sadly, recalling all the students who had refused his training, whether of their own accord or not. He lists Jacen Syndulla, Grogu, and Sabine. Ahsoka tells him that none of those cases were his fault, and he responds by saying they weren't hers either. Ahsoka says nothing, but it's clear that she disagrees. Luke asks how Sabine is doing nowadays, and Ahsoka admits that she doesn't know, that they haven't spoken in years. There's a split-second flashback of Sabine, her expression showing clearly that she feels betrayed. She was right, Ahsoka says. I gave up on her. Luke reassuringly reminds her that she only did what she thought was right. Ahsoka shows silent disagreement once more. The sound of a comm beeping alerts her, and she retrieves the device, Luke stepping away to give her privacy as she answers the call. It turns out to be Hera. Ahsoka reacts with pleasant surprise, saying it's good to hear from her. The two exchange some pleasantries, but throughout the exchange it becomes clear to Ahsoka that something isn't right. She asks Hera about it, and Hera admits that she's worried about Sabine and has been for a long time. She begs Ahsoka to talk to her, but Ahsoka insists that Sabine would refuse such a thing. Hera admits that yes, Sabine is angry with Ahsoka, but that doesn't mean she doesn't still respect and care about her. Ahsoka reluctantly agrees to try, and Hera offers her some words of encouragement before ending the transmission. We cut to Hera, who quietly voices to herself her wavering hope that things will work out. The next scene opens with an establishing shot of Sabine's home on Lothal. We cut to a shot of inside, where Hera and Jacen have apparently just arrived. Sabine greets Jacen enthusiastically, after which Hera asks her son to give them a moment to talk. Sabine and Hera sit facing each other, an awkward pause stretching between them. Sabine voices her desire to simply get things over with, so Hera gets straight to the point. She says Sabine can't keep doing this. Sabine insists that she may finally have a real lead, but Hera says she's heard that before. Sabine claims that if Hera could just hear what Morgan had to say, she'd understand. Hera breaks eye contact, falling completely silent. Sabine recognizes her look of guilt and manages to put two and two together. She says Hera already knew, and Hera relents. She explains how Ahsoka told her Morgan's words after the Imperial Enforcer had been brought into custody. Sabine is furious that she wasn't told, but Hera says it was because she knew exactly how Sabine would react. Sabine insists she won't give up on Ezra as long as there's a chance he's still alive. In the background, Jacen is giggling excitedly while playing with Sabine's Lothcat. Hera snaps at him to be careful since he might end up getting scratched. Sabine seems to disapprove of the outburst but says nothing. Hera returns to the conversation at hand, reminding Sabine that the fiasco with Morgan wasn't the first time Hera had risked her position to cover for her. She asks how many more years of Sabine's life she intends to waste on dead ends, and says her duty as a New Republic commander deserves her undivided attention. Lastly, she tells Sabine in no uncertain terms that Ezra is gone, that they're both gone. Sabine says quietly, "Well, that's rich coming from you." Hera reacts indignantly, but Sabine persists, saying Hera is only acting like she's moved on from Kanan's death, that the way she coddles Jacen speaks volumes. She hasn't let go of Kanan at all, she's still holding on to him through Jacen. Sabine reminds Hera of how she turned down Luke's offer to train Jacen, even though Jacen wanted to be a Jedi, and still does. Hera angrily points out that Jacen is only a child. Sabine counters that she and Ezra were only a few years older when they started their training. Hera shuts down the conversation, taking Jacen by the hand and preparing to leave. But before she does, she warns Sabine that this isn't over. Then she storms out, leaving Sabine sitting alone. We cut to later in the day. The dim orange lights coming through the windows signals the arrival of dusk. Sabine still sits alone, holding the holo display in her hand. She activates it, and it plays an old recording of Ezra. He asks her how things are going, mentions how his training is coming along during her absence, and teases her playfully, saying he's technically her senior since he's been learning from Kanan for longer than she has, and tells her he has no intention of falling behind, meaning she'll have to train twice as hard. Tears start to run down Sabine's face. Then we hear Kanan's voice, and he pops his head into the recording, telling Sabine sternly that she'd better not be slacking off from her training just because she's off on a mission with Hera. As Ezra irritably explains that he was just telling her that, Sabine starts crying harder. Next, we see Sabine asleep on her bed. We get flashes of the memorial commemorating those who sacrificed their lives for the liberation of Lothal. Hera is holding a teenage Sabine close. We glimpse Sabine's painting, the focus shifting to Kanan and Ezra. Then the time shifts. Everyone else has already gone, but Sabine has stayed behind, standing before the painting and staring into the distance. Suddenly, she's not alone. Ahsoka's with her, offering her hand. Sabine accepts it, and the focus jumps back to the painting, except now it's faded and cracked, and a growing scream can be heard in the background. Sabine jolts awake, realizing that the scream is her own. The extremely dim lighting outside shows that it's very early morning. We cut to Sabine opening up a compartment in her room. It contains an object hidden in cloth. She unwraps it to reveal Ezra's lightsaber. She picks it up, contemplating it for a moment. Then it cuts to outside. Sabine is sitting before the painting from her memories. She says nothing, reaching up to place her hand on the overlap between Ezra and Kanan. Then she stands up and takes several paces back, gripping Ezra's lightsaber in both hands and using an opening stance for lightsaber combat. She starts cycling through the maneuvers, but as she does, she slowly becomes more and more aggressive with her swings, almost as though she's attacking an invisible enemy that she deeply despises. Finally, she strikes her last finishing move and switches to a resting position. Then we hear a familiar voice remark with pleasant surprise that she's been keeping up her training. The camera pans to show Ahsoka standing some ways behind Sabine. Sabine closes her eyes for a moment, an evident emotional pain on her face. Then she turns to face Ahsoka, who asks if she still comes here as often as she did. Sabine ignores the question, demanding with thinly veiled anger as to what Ahsoka's doing here. Ahsoka answers that she's here to see Sabine. Sabine scoffs, asking if Hera put her up to it. Ahsoka says that Hera is worried about her. Sabine snaps that keeping secrets from her is a strange way to show concern. Ahsoka says that spending her life chasing after ghosts won't bring either Ezra or Kanan back. Sabine insists she won't give up, that she's not like Ahsoka. This time, Ahsoka stays silent. Sabine barrels ahead, reminding Ahsoka of her promise to finish Sabine's training and that instead she just tried to pass her off to someone else. Sabine angrily says that Kanan never would have done such a thing to her, that he took her on and stuck with her even though he already had an apprentice. Fighting back tears, she says that after he and Ezra were gone, she was grieving and felt so alone. Hera had thrown her efforts fully into acting as general and later caring for Jason, and Sabine had been left struggling with powers she still didn't fully understand. She'd needed the comfort of someone she knew and trusted. She'd needed help, but in the end, Ahsoka had refused to give it. Sabine turns her back on Ahsoka, resuming her opening stance and telling Ahsoka that it's better if she just leave. Sabine repeats a few maneuvers from earlier, but after several seconds of silence, she looks back to find Ahsoka gone. She loses her composure and starts to cry. The next scene opens on the prisoner transport from earlier receiving a distress signal from an unknown ship. The ship seems to be in dire straits, and after Captain Hale determines that no other Republic ship is close enough to offer aid, he cautiously approves the vessel to board his transport. He greets the recipient of his rescue in the hangar bay, a figure draped in a black cloak and hood, but once they lower their hood, they're revealed as Shin Hati. Shin offers a brief thanks, then immediately draws her concealed lightsaber and springs into a destructive rampage. She maims the captain and slaughters his men. As in the original scene, she fights her way toward the bridge, where she promptly kills everyone in sight, thus securing control of the transport. Then she quickly locates Morgan's cell and heads there straight away. Morgan doesn't seem surprised by Shin's arrival, saying she was wondering when exactly Shin would show up. Shin asks if Morgan was expecting a rescue. There's a brief pause, and Morgan says no. She recalls the time she first encountered Baylan and Shin, a time when two Force users appeared seemingly out of nowhere offering to aid her search for Thrawn. Morgan admits she knew it was too good to be true, but was far too desperate to turn down such an offer. She asks where Baylan and Shin's loyalties truly lie, since it's evidently not with Thrawn. Shin answers that what they seek is beyond Morgan's feeble comprehension. Morgan appears unperturbed. She says that no matter what Baylan and Shin might do, Thrawn's return is inevitable. Shin remarks on her powerful sense of faith. Morgan says that Thrawn was the greatest genius of their time, and that no force could ever frighten him or hold him back. Shin has clearly had enough of listening to Morgan, and ignites her saber to finish the job, but Morgan warns her that there's a problem with her plan. Shin impatiently asks what that might be, and Morgan reminds her that she was desperate when she met Baylan and Shin. Desperate, but not stupid. She tells Shin that she and her master won't simply have their way, and Shin's eyes widen with realization. She demands to know who Morgan gave the information to, and Morgan names Commander Sabine Wren, adding that she's not the only one who knows, and glancing up at the corner of her cell. Shin follows her line of sight to find a security camera, and cold rage spills across her face. With an angry shout, she cuts Morgan down. We cut to Hera's home, where she and Jason are preparing to leave. While Jason is gathering things to take with him, he force pulls one of them into his hands when he thinks Hera isn't looking. But Hera sees it regardless and immediately stops what she's doing. She reminds Jason that she doesn't like it when he does that, and Jason hangs his head. He mumbles a question, asking if his father was a bad Jedi. Hera quickly assures him that he wasn't, that Kanan was one of the best Jedi she'd known, prompting Jason to ask why he shouldn't be a Jedi then too. Hera explains that a Jedi's responsibility is to protect others, and that's how Kanan died, protecting her and the rest of his family. She ends by saying that she simply can't lose Jason that way too, then urges him to finish getting ready, lingering a moment longer with a thoughtful look on her face. We jump back to the prisoner transport, where the injured Captain Hale is pitifully dragging himself across the floor in a vain attempt to get to the bridge and signal for help. Shin enters and swiftly crosses the room to him, grabbing him roughly by the collar and demanding to know who all saw the recordings of Sabine interrogating Morgan. Hale refuses to answer at first, until Shin starts digging the heel of her boot into his wounds. The captain screams in pain and swears to tell her whatever she wants to know. Shin impatiently shouts in his face, demanding answers. We cut to Hera and Jason boarding the Ghost, where they're greeted by Chopper. Hera tells him to set a course for Home 1. Chopper warbles back at her, and Hera's response tells us that she received a transmission from an assistant. She heads to the controls to see what it is, and a hologram of her assistant tells her that a Captain Hale sent her some recordings that he figured she'd be wanting. As the camera pushes in on Hera's somewhat disgruntled face, we hear Captain Hale's strained voice saying, "Syndulla, Hera Syndulla." By this point, Shin is shaking with rage. She releases Hale, drawing her lightsaber and finishing him off with a wild slash. Then she turns, her hands curling into fists and uncurling repeatedly. Then, unable to contain it any longer, she releases a furious, animalistic scream, and the screen cuts to black.
And that's it for episode 1. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and how you would have changed this episode. As always, if you enjoyed, be sure to drop a like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for future content. I honestly don't know if I'll be finishing this series since I ended up losing a lot of drive for the project very quickly and didn't get a lot of positive feedback either. But we'll see. And in the meantime, if you want to see more Ahsoka related rewrites, check out our Fixing Ahsoka series, where my sister and I are rewriting each of Ahsoka's appearances in the Clone Wars. Anyway, thanks to our Discord community for being a sounding board for this project and offering a host of ideas. I know a lot of people wanted to see us just absolutely rip into the show here on the channel, but there are already so many great breakdowns of just how awful it is that I'd prefer to point you in their direction. I think it goes without saying that if you haven't seen EFAP's reaction to the series, you absolutely should. I'd also recommend Disparu's reactions, as well as Chris Reed's 5-hour breakdown of Ahsoka, which honestly doesn't have anywhere near as many likes as it deserves. I'll include the links to all 3 in the description below. And if you're looking for more ways to show your support here on the channel, check out the link to our Patreon, where we offer all sorts of special perks to our members. We could always use the support, and it would be immensely appreciated. Finally, don't forget to stay loud and proud, folks. I'm your Alibi, and I will see you next time.
Dilapidated looking. That's hard to say, goddamn. He starts asking their guide questions about how many times he traveled through the gate. The captain reluctantly grants her permission to question. This is getting worse. And concludes that nothing Sabine might do could possibly prevent and concludes that Sabine It keeps getting worse. Possibly prevent Why did I put it like that? That's so hard to say.